Welcome to our show, Unlearning, with me, Skhumbuzo Jwara, where each week we discuss a social issue through the lens of a book I've read. Today, we're filming at Exclusive Books, Sandton. And the books we're looking at today are available at the store. Now, our aim is not to give a blow-by-blow, chapter-by-chapter review of the books we read, because there are many other channels who do that well, and perhaps better than we could. Instead, what we do is explore social issues that affect us daily, using the books that we read as a way to think about them critically and introduce a level of empathy to the conversation that is otherwise missing in today's popular culture. This week we've read two books. The State of Affairs by Esther Perel, which explores infidelity with the view of looking at it not with the purpose of trying to find someone to blame, but rather with the empathy necessary to give dignity to relationships that are affected through cheating. Our second book is How Can I Ever Trust You Again by Andrew G. Marshall, which gives a step-by-step guide on what to do when you found out that there is an infidelity in your relationship, whether you choose to stay or leave. Now, to frame this conversation, it's important to keep in mind that human beings are at the center of any conversation around infidelity. And Esther Perel interviews an array of people who share their stories. And this is one worth beginning with. To quote, "It was like my whole life had been erased, just like that. I was so devastated that I called in sick and took the rest of the week off. I could barely stay upright. I forgot to eat, which for me is a very big deal. Jillian tells me that in all of her 50-plus years, she has never experienced this kind of pain before. How can this hurt so badly when no one has died?" So, because today we're discussing infidelity, I should have perhaps begun this episode with a trigger warning, because so many of us have been affected in some way or another by infidelity. Either we have been the person who has been a victim to betrayal, the one who has done the betraying, or been the other person. It occurred to me while witnessing the contrasting responses to various celebrity cheating scandals that there is something missing in how we respond to infidelity and how we talk about it. Listen, for instance, to a popular South African YouTuber talking about a person who is an alleged third party to an infidelity that occurred in a marriage.
I just saw the picture of Mihlali out here celebrating with a married man. She's out here celebrating while the wife is crying herself to sleep. Mihlali, does your Jezebel ways have no bounds? You are truly despicable. You know that? You are the worst form of a human being, Mihlali, a hoe of the highest order. You have no shame in your game. The prettiest people do the ugliest things for the road to riches and diamond rings. Mihlali, at least now we know you have a type. We know that you're attracted to boys.
Wow. Generally, there's always someone that we look to blame. And it's framed along the moral lines over who is then the good person who's worthy of public support and the bad one who deserves our outrage. And more often than not, the woman carries more shame than the man, no matter the details of the infidelity, and no matter whether she was simply the third party in it all. The previous video isn't even the most popular incident this year where infidelity was used as a weapon of shame that exhibited our own beliefs about who is shamed when there's an infidelity. Will and Jada Pinkett Smith's publicly complex relationship, which they've both acknowledged during many interviews was an open marriage at various points, is most illustrative of our response to infidelity. Jada, after her much publicized entanglement with August Alsina, was maligned all round and cast as the problematic figure, despite Will having had sexual relationships of his own as per their open marriage. I'm straying away from gender politics, even though they are important, because that isn't the crux of Esther Perel's book. Hers is simply to suggest that we need to have an understanding of infidelity and cheating that isn't simplistic as finding who is to blame, but that has the necessary and requisite empathy to give dignity to the partnership that has been broken as a consequence of this ultimate break in trust. So, why do people cheat? The motives for straying and staying vary widely. And what is often most painful to the person who has been betrayed is that when in romantic relationships, our identity becomes enmeshed with each other. And a betrayal of that relationship represents a loss of our own identity and how we see ourselves too. There is a caution on identity Esther Perel notes in her book. No one in a relationship can be all things to us all of the time. And yet, modern relationships seem to demand this of our partners. Now, historically, marriages used to be about everything except love. Financial security, children to pass on the inheritance to and legacy, and growing your wealth. In fact, as Esther Perel points out, love was something that was sought after through affairs outside of the marriage, but was socially accepted only when the man did it due to patriarchal social norms. So in fact, whilst in today's society, the marriage of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith is shunned as an abhorrence, it would have been an example of a successful one not too long ago. And this shift towards individualism and women having more freedom and control over their lives through financially lucrative careers is partly what causes the outrage over an affair and why most of it is directed towards the woman. As a consequence of a society that covers individualism yet lacks true community, we look for in one person everything that we should receive from a community. Your partner is your lover, best friend, therapist, social confidant, financial advisor, business partner, and even spiritual advisor. We have taken the role of priest, therapist, father, mother, friend, lover, and enmeshed it into one person, demanding that they not disappoint us on any account. And when we find someone who encompasses even one of those characteristics better than the partner we already have, we lack the tools to engage with that person, not as a potential replacement for our romantic partner, but rather an acknowledgement that one person cannot possibly fulfill every role you are in need of all of the time, at exactly the moments you need them to. We no longer leave the partners we're with because we're unhappy. Rather, we leave them because we could be happier. Perel argues that for many of us, love is no longer a verb, a doing word. Rather, it has become an adjective describing how you feel, which must be a constant state of excitement, infatuation, and growth. Whether or not all else in your relationship works, a healthy home, stable finances, relatively happy children, if you are not excited by your partner, it has become easier to justify giving into the excitement provided by someone else at the expense of the relative boredom in your relationship. And as illustrated by the Will and Jada Smith scenario, open relationships aren't a safeguard against infidelity because they too have rules. And so, while divorce or ending a relationship after infidelity used to carry the shame, now staying with the person who has cheated is what carries the shame. The paradox of choice is an observation that, given many choices rather than a few, people become stressed, and this makes decision-making difficult. Open to so many choices in today's technologically connected world, it's little wonder that our decision to remain in one relationship, no matter how healthy, becomes hard when there are so many other potentially better options available to us. We live in a world where we're open to so many choices in romantic partners that I imagine that there's a couple watching this right now in each other's arms while having an affair. Monogamy used to mean one person for life. Now it means one person at a time. The advice we often receive about infidelity ignores the fact that when you're a person who has been cheated on, more often than not, you still have strong feelings for the person and still have in mind a future you remain committed to and have sacrificed towards. At times, there are children involved, or often families that have been united, and businesses that rely on the union between two people, just as was the case with Bill and Melinda Gates after their divorce as a result of Bill Gates' infidelity. We could spend hours discussing this. There are few human experiences as consequential as romantic love and naturally infidelity. I'm a deep romantic myself, the kind of person who, when in love, looks at the object of my affection, smile, and wonder how it is that no one else sees that the sun is dim in comparison. But in an environment where there'll always be a better option that people are willing to pursue, no matter how satisfied they are with the person that they have, simply because they could be happier, I often wonder whether I may just choose to remain single and live vicariously through those who have been fortunate enough to find someone as equally committed to them as they are. Now, don't misunderstand me. It's a beautiful thing that we have more options and increased choices in life partners. And thank goodness, because there was a time when we had no choice but to marry the one attractive person in our village or town, who it would turn out wasn't even a 5 or a 6 out of 10 in the bigger city. What I am concerned about is that we exercise those choices even when we have made a commitment to someone who has most of the qualities we desire in a life partner. Now, whether we choose to stay or to go after an infidelity requires courage from both the person who has been betrayed and the person who has done the betraying. From the person who has been betrayed, the courage is well understood. One has to learn to forgive and live with the person who has caused you so much hurt. From the person guilty of the betrayal, it takes courage to move away from the desire to flee the shame that comes from causing hurt to the person you care for, and to remain to do the dirty work of regaining their trust. And in our society, which accepts infidelity as a norm, to accept accountability for the hurt that you have caused is a courageous step. Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs, calls for us to rethink our ideas about infidelity beyond simple blame. But once you've discovered that the person whose identity you've merged yours with as a consequence of a relationship has broken that trust, it's difficult to think about what to do next. And in that regard, our second book, How Can I Ever Trust You Again, gives a better guidance on what to do. When we witness stories about infidelity involving public figures, it's often so easy to forget that at the center of it all are people who are hurting as a consequence of a break of trust. Have a look, for instance, at this scene, and I hope it reminds you that empathy, rather than blame and shame, is what's needed in our conversations around infidelity.
What did you do?
I did everything.
Like what?
I had sex with other girls. I did everything. if you would go to that measure to find whatever, why wouldn't you just leave?
I don't know. I think I was like stupid. How many times did you cheat on me?
I don't know.
If you had to say.
I wasn't counting.